This is BBC News with me, Christian Fraser. The new COVID variant Omicron is turning up in more and more countries as travel restrictions are tightened further. President Biden says the new variant is a cause for concern, but not panic. In the UK, the vaccination programme will be widened further and the booster programme speeded up. The British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell goes on trial in New York accused of trafficking underage girls for her former lover, Jeffrey Epstein. Twitter confirms that its founder Jack Dorsey has stepped down as CEO with immediate effect. And it's the Bidens' first Christmas in the White House. We'll take a look at their decorations and how they compare with the last 4 years. Hello. Within 3 weeks of scientists first detecting the Delta variant, it was present in 53 countries. Omicron has already been identified in at least 15, so it's a fair bet that it's spreading further and wider than is currently known. The UK government, like others in the EU, has moved swiftly, placing at least 10 African countries on the red list. It won't stop the spread, but it might slow it long enough for the booster programme to offer more protection. Doctor, thank you very much indeed for coming on. Dr. Naomi Forrester, lovely to get your expertise on that. Thank you. Now, the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, former girlfriend and close associate of the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, has opened today in New York. The British publishing heiress has been accused of trafficking 4 unnamed minors, grooming and recruiting them for her former lover to abuse in the late 90s and early 2000s. She's been in a New York jail since her arrest in July 2020. She's not pleading guilty to any of the charges. The BBC's Neda Tawfik has more. Sarah, it's really good to get your expertise. I hope you'll come back on as the trial gets underway fully. It's really interesting to hear your thoughts. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Do stay with us on BBC News. Still to come, more than 100,000 people in the UK are facing a 4th day without power in the aftermath of Storm Arwen at the weekend. More than 100,000 homes across the UK are without power tonight for a 4th day in the wake of Storm Arwen that battered the UK with winds close to 100 miles an hour. Our North of England correspondent Fiona Trott reports. Yeah, still very cold, very Christmassy actually around the country at the moment. Now, I noticed today in what I know was a very serious press conference at the White House, there were a lot of baubles in shot, which I found a tad distracting. Not that I begrudge a bit of tinsel in the current climate, but what do you make of that? Is it me or is that overkill on the baubles? What do you do in your house? Do you go full Monty like that around the fireplace? Quite traditional, isn't it? Anyway, this is a job that's normally reserved for the First Lady, and this is Jill Biden's first attempt at putting up decorations. The theme this year is Gifts from the Heart. So it features lots of photographs of former presidents and their families, including Donald Trump. You see, there is the spirit of Christmas. Even Donald Trump forgiven. That's proper Bob Cratchit, that is.
If you've got questions about the stories making headlines, Reality Check is here to help you get the facts straight. Our team of experts examine the evidence and cut through the spin. Join me, Chris Morris, here on BBC World News, or go to bbc.com/Reality Check.
This is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers here in the UK and around the world. President Biden says the newly identified Omicron variant of coronavirus is a cause for concern, but not panic. Prince Charles is in Barbados as the island becomes a republic, cutting its ties with the monarchy after 400 years. Twitter has confirmed its founder Jack Dorsey has stepped down as CEO with immediate effect. Plus, how customers at Britain's highest pub got a longer stay than they bargained for after the building was cut off by a storm. If there's anything world leaders have learnt over the past 2 years of this pandemic, it's that their political fortunes can turn almost as quickly as the virus. So they're doing their utmost right now to impress a message of calm and quiet authority as speculation runs wild over what this latest variant is and what protection we have. More science, less politics. That's what we need. Dr. Caitlin Jetelina, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Prince Charles has touched down in Barbados as the country prepares to break with the Crown after nearly 400 years. The island will become a republic at midnight local time tonight, with the Queen removed as their head of state. The Prince says he's travelled to Barbados to highlight the goals and values that are shared by the two nations and will continue to link them past tonight's significant constitutional shift. Celestina Olude reports from Barbados. Significant moment for the people in Barbados. Now, Jack Dorsey, the co-founder of Twitter, has stepped down from his executive role at the social media company. He'll be replaced by Chief Technology Officer Parag Agrawal. It caught the market somewhat by surprise, bringing to an end Dorsey's much criticised tenure as Chief Executive Officer of both Twitter and Square, his digital payments company. The share price last time we looked was down nearly 2%. So let's get some reaction to that. With me here in the studio is Elizabeth Owoskin. Sorry, Elizabeth, that disappeared off the prompter and I lost your name for a second. Lovely to have you with us anyway. Can I just ask you, first of all, whether it was expected? Because it seemed to catch the market somewhat by surprise. Yeah, Parag Agrawal, a name we're going to have to get used to pronouncing and saying a lot more. Elizabeth Owoskin, thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Stay with us on BBC News, still to come. How a snowstorm left dozens of people stranded for days in one of the UK's most remote pubs. We'll explain. The biggest banking leak Africa has ever seen has shed light on companies linked to relatives and associates of former Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila, receiving millions of dollars in public funds. The BBC can now exclusively reveal a presidency account was set up at the bank central to the leak during Kabila's tenure in power. DRC, one of the world's poorest countries, really important investigation by the BBC's Africa Eye investigations team. If you want to see a longer version of that investigation, there's a 15-minute version on the Africa section of the BBC website, bbc.co.uk/news. Let's take a look at some of the day's other news. Iran has demanded that all sanctions be lifted in a verifiable process as talks aimed at reviving the 2015 nuclear deal resumed in Vienna for the first time in 5 months. A statement by the Iranian foreign minister said the US failed to understand that there was no way to return to the agreement without the removal of all sanctions. 30 endangered southern white rhinos have been flown from South Africa to Rwanda in a jumbo jet in possibly the largest single transfer of the species ever undertaken. It's hoped the rhinos, which can weigh up to 2 tons, will be safer in Rwanda than in South Africa, where poachers kill an average of 3 a day. 60 customers and staff have finally emerged after 3 nights marooned in Britain's highest pub. The lock-in at the Tan Hill Inn began on Friday evening when Storm Arwen brought heavy snow to the Yorkshire Dales. That night, an Oasis tribute band was playing and the musicians were stuck there too.
Danny Savage, BBC News, Tan Hill.
Can you imagine some of the phone calls home? Yes, I'm still stuck here. We're still snowed in. Bet there are 1 or 2 sore heads. Thanks for watching. We'll be back same time tomorrow. See you then. This is BBC News, I'm Christian Fraser. The new COVID-19 variant was in Europe earlier than previously thought. Test samples show cases of Omicron were present in the Netherlands 11 days before the variant was first identified by South Africa. The first of 4 victims gives evidence against Ghislaine Maxwell in New York. The woman, known only as Jane, says she was groomed at the age of 14. The head of Britain's security agency MI6 has warned the Chinese are conducting large-scale spying operations against the UK and its allies. And Barbados has spent its first day as a republic with the president and not the Queen as its head of state. Hello. Despite all the uncertainty, it is likely that COVID vaccines will give us protection from the variant Omicron. In fact, tonight, the chief executive of BioNTech told Reuters the vaccine they developed with Pfizer will give substantial protection from severe disease. But how many times since last year have scientists told us that we only emerge from this pandemic together? It is a practical as well as a moral obligation to vaccinate the developing world, because if we don't, other variants will appear. Yeah, a really significant development, that the first licensing deal that's been agreed in Africa. The WHO would say we need many more of those. Now, in 1994, a 14-year-old girl who identified in a New York court today as Jane was attending a Michigan summer camp for talented children. And while she was there, she was approached by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Epstein introduced himself as a wealthy benefactor who had given scholarships to several young people. They swapped numbers. Soon after, they began taking Jane on shopping trips, to the cinema, and then he sexually assaulted her. The prosecution alleged that Ghislaine Maxwell was more than an innocent bystander. She was deeply involved, they say, in the grooming of an unsuspecting minor. Let's go to Manhattan. Our correspondent Neda Tawfik is outside the court. Day 2 of this trial, Neda, and the first alleged victim taking the stand. Neda Tawfik in Manhattan. Thank you very much indeed. Let's take a look at some of the day's other stories. At least 3 people have been killed and 6 others wounded in a shooting at a high school in Michigan. The incident at Oxford High School, about 35 miles north of Detroit, drew a major response from law enforcement, according to the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. The suspect is a 15-year-old student at the school. The US judge has sentenced the wife of Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman to 3 years in prison. Emma Coronel Espuro pleaded guilty to helping the Sinaloa drug cartel with trafficking, drugs and money laundering. Prosecutors had wanted a longer sentence, but the judge said she was a teenager when she married Guzman and that she'd cooperated with the authorities. And the singer Adele has announced a residency at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, following in the footsteps of Celine Dion and Sir Elton John. Her latest album, 30, is the fastest selling album of 2021. Do stay with us on BBC News, still to come. Packing away the royal standard as Barbados severs ties with the Queen, becoming the world's newest republic. It's not often the head of MI6 gives a broadcast interview, but today the new boss, Richard Moore, known in spy circles as C, stepped out of the shadows to speak to the BBC. His job is to analyse the risk side of the ledger to inform the government here what he views as the biggest threats. And currently his sights are fixed firmly on China. Barbados is the world's newest republic. At midnight, the Royal Standard flag was lowered in Bridgetown to mark the nation's transition to its new constitutional status. The new president, Dame Sandra Mason, replaces Queen Elizabeth as head of state. And in the capital, Bridgetown, the bells rang out to celebrate the moment. Celestina Ololode in Barbados. Not often we go there. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let me quickly bring you some pictures from Minnesota. We can see the Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar on stage. President Biden is visiting to push his bipartisan infrastructure bill, which was signed into law 2 weeks ago. Minnesota will stand to benefit around $6 billion going to the state from that plan. But of course, we're keen to hear whether the president might just address the issue of the new variant, the new COVID variant. Obviously very keen to push the booster programme, as was Boris Johnson here in the UK today. So we'll perhaps dip into a little bit of that in the second half of the programme. We're going to talk about the UK's booster programme. We're going to hear from the pharmacies who are at the cold face of the rollout over the next few weeks. Are they getting enough support? Is there enough vaccine? We'll tell you all about it. This is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers here in the UK and around the world. Every adult in England is to be offered a booster vaccination by the end of January.
Today, our position is and always will be immeasurably better than it was a year ago. What we're doing is taking some proportionate precautionary measures while our scientists crack the Omicron code.
Former President Donald Trump's chief of staff will testify before a congressional committee investigating a mob assault on the Capitol building in January. More companies are using automated video interviews to hire workers. Is it fair? And in Paris, the singer and activist Josephine Baker becomes the first black woman to be honoured at the Pantheon. Welcome back. Boris Johnson will get his booster on Thursday, and he's urging everyone else to roll up their sleeves, quite literally, to get that third jab before the new variant, Omicron, spreads further. The Prime Minister says he wants everyone who is eligible for a booster to have been offered it by the end of January. The trouble is, the NHS is not vaccinating at quite the same rate it was in the spring. Donald Trump's former Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, is cooperating with the House Select Committee that is investigating the January 6 riot. We're told Mr Meadows is providing records and will agree to sit for an initial deposition. It's a significant development. Of course, someone who had a ringside view of the day within the White House. Separate to that, a panel of judges in the Court of Appeal in Washington today was considering Mr Trump's attempt to block the release of records and conversations he'd had that day. 3 weeks ago, a district court ruled the document should be handed over to the committee. So let's bring in Elizabeth Wydra. She's the president of the Constitutional Accountability Centre. Elizabeth, lovely to have you back on the programme. Let's just start with Mark Meadows. Steve Bannon clearly relished the idea of going to court to defy the committee. Mark Meadows, not so much. Elizabeth, lovely to have you on the programme. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Let's quickly take you back to Minnesota. President Biden has just started speaking at the Technical College, and he is talking about his $1 trillion infrastructure plan. President Biden speaking in Minnesota about the money the state will get to rebuild its roads and its broadband and its water systems. We're going to keep across that because we want to know whether he's going to talk about COVID and the Omicron variant and what plans he has for the United States. And of course, if we get anything from that, then we will bring it to you. Do stay with us here on BBC News. Still to come. More companies are using automated video interviews in their hiring process. We'll look at the implications for all sides. Job interviews, not something we look forward to. I've certainly had my fair share of corkers here at the BBC, but then sometimes there is that odd occasion when you relax into the interview. You manage to build a rapport with the interviewer, but what if the interviewer wasn't there? Increasingly, there are many young people who find they're speaking to a computer. Automated video interviews, which are designed to whittle down the initial applicants to a more manageable group of finalists. Dr. Zahira Jasser, really fascinating. The future and the way we're all going to be interviewed, no doubt, in the future. Hopefully not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
The American-born singer and activist Josephine Baker, who made her name and her home in France in the 1920s, has been honoured at the Pantheon Mausoleum in Paris, the resting place for all the nation's heroes. She's the first black woman to be memorialised there in recognition of her work on civil rights and the part she played in the resistance during the Second World War. Josephine Baker, recognised among some of the greatest names in France. Voltaire, Rousseau, Victor Hugo, Jean Moulin, all of them recognised at the Pantheon in Paris. It is quite the tribute and quite the celebration today. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Do join us for that. Goodbye.
Having a global perspective.
When big names talk, they talk to the BBC.
This is BBC News with me, Christian Fraser. The Omicron variant is spreading, with the United States tonight reporting its first confirmed case. But as countries respond by tightening travel restrictions, the World Health Organization says there are better strategies to contain the virus.
There are ways that you can de-risk travel in terms of having increased testing, more testing before departure, more testing on arrival.
In the United States, the Supreme Court considers whether a 15-week ban on abortions introduced in Mississippi should be upheld. If it is, then abortion could become illegal in almost half the country. Is Bosnia once again on the brink of war? Tonight we'll talk to the man who once shared the presidency and who now leads the main Bosniak party. And the American author Alice Sebold has apologised for her part in the conviction of a man she claimed had raped her in 1981. We'll speak to the film producer who produced the evidence that cleared Anthony Broadwater. Hello. The World Health Organization says at least 23 countries around the world now have cases of the new COVID variant Omicron, and that it expects that number to grow as scientists around the world sequence more test samples. The first case has been detected in the United States. The patient had recently returned from South Africa, was fully vaccinated, and had mild symptoms that are improving. The US Supreme Court has begun hearing arguments in what many consider the most important case it has heard in half a century. It's considering a Mississippi state law that would ban abortion after 15 weeks. That is in direct conflict with the law first established in 1973, which we know as Roe versus Wade. It prevents the government imposing any undue burden on a woman's right to choose abortion before viability, which in America is considered to be 22 to 24 weeks. Ashley Koenig, lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Let's take a look at some of the day's other stories. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says a troop build-up on Ukraine's border gives Russia the capacity to invade on short order if President Putin makes such a decision. He said the United States would be resolute in the case of any confrontation. On Thursday, Mr. Blinken expected to meet his Russian counterpart during an economic summit in Sweden. The European Union says its new global investment plan will be a true alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. The European Commission has outlined plans to raise 300 billion euros via its global gateway strategy. Beijing's initiative has invested billions of dollars in dozens of countries over the last 8 years. And in the last few hours, the Women's Tennis Association has suspended all tournaments in China. The move is in response to concern about the well-being of the Chinese player Peng Shuai, who disappeared from public view for 3 weeks after accusing a top Chinese official of sexual assault. The WTA chief, Steve Simon, said he had serious doubts that she was free, safe, and not subject to intimidation. Do stay with us on BBC News, still to come. Donald Trump tested positive for COVID a few days before his debate with Joe Biden last year. His former chief of staff claims in his new book. We'll discuss. Cast your mind back to September last year when the campaign for the US presidential election was white hot. Donald Trump was in Cleveland, Ohio for his first debate against Joe Biden. Two men of an advanced age in a relatively confined space and at the height of the pandemic. Anthony Zerka in Washington. Always good to get your views. Thank you very much indeed for that. Do stay with us. We're going to talk Bosnia after the break. Serious situation developing. Stay with us. This is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers here in the UK and around the world. The EU chief says the time may have come for countries in the bloc to mandate the COVID vaccine. We'll talk to the leader of Bosnia's Bosniak party about fears of a Balkan breakup. Plus, the American author Alice Sebold apologises for her part in the conviction of a man cleared of raping her in 1981. We'll speak to the film producer who got the evidence that cleared Anthony Broadwater. Perhaps at no stage since the conflict in Bosnia ended in 1995 has there been so much talk of war. There is widespread consensus right now that the country is again on the brink of what is undoubtedly the most serious crisis since the Dayton Accords were signed. The crisis, in large part, is being fueled by the actions of one man, Milorad Dodik. Bakir Izetbegovic speaking to us this evening from Sarajevo. We are yet again reporting on gun violence in America's schools. In Oxford, Michigan, on Tuesday afternoon, a 15-year-old student killed 4 of his fellow classmates and injured 7 others. In the last few minutes, a judge has ordered that the suspect should be held without bond. Dave Cullen, nice to talk to you. Thank you for coming on the programme.
Thank you.
The American author Alice Sebold has apologised for her part in the conviction of a man she wrongly accused of raping her in 1981. Anthony Broadwater was arrested and convicted on flawed evidence. He served 16 years in prison, but always protested his innocence and was finally exonerated last week.
Condo in San Francisco.
The producer, Timothy Machanti. That's it from us. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Reality check. Get the facts straight.
This is BBC News. I'm Christian Fraser. Europe is moving to isolate the unvaccinated. Germany says those who refuse to get a COVID jab will be barred from public life. A vaccine mandate will likely be introduced from February. But the tighter restrictions are taking their toll on the airline and hospitality industry with widespread cancellations. We'll speak to the boss of one of Britain's major hotel groups. Deadlock on the Hill. The warring parties in Washington are facing a legislative pile-up before Christmas. Is the 117th US Congress fit for purpose? And do you want to be home alone this Christmas? The house Kevin McAllister turned into a fortress could be yours for just a night. We'll tell you how. Hello. Last month, in the midst of a steep third wave of coronavirus, Austria took a step that would previously have been unthinkable in a Western democracy. They announced that vaccinations would become compulsory for the entire population. Until that point, most governments had rejected the idea of a vaccine mandate. Not anymore. Today, Germany signalled it would follow suit and that vaccinations will become mandatory next year. The outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel says she favours the measure. The German Parliament will vote on it in February. More than 24 countries on 6 continents say they've now detected the variant, and most of them have imposed tighter travel restrictions on the southern African nations. But ahead of the Christmas holidays, these new restrictions are affecting bookings at what is a critical time for airlines and the hospitality industry. We're coming to the end of Joe Biden's first year in office, but December will determine to a great extent how the report card looks. Yes, there have been some notable successes. The $1.9 trillion American rescue plan passed earlier in the year staved off the worst of the crisis. 69 votes in the Senate for a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill was, in the context, nothing short of miraculous. It's all gearing up for an exciting new year. Amanda, thank you very much. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Stay with us on BBC News. Still to come, Germany says Auf Wiedersehen to Angela Merkel. We'll discuss her legacy next. Within the past couple of hours, Germany's Angela Merkel has been given a ceremonial send-off after 16 years in office. It comes days before Germany's parliament is due to officially elect Social Democrat Olaf Scholz as her successor as Chancellor. Today's military ceremony, known as Grosse Zapfenstreich, is the highest tribute paid by the German army. Angela Merkel's choice of music for the choreographed event did raise some eyebrows. Well, I will have to get the book, I can tell. I need to be more informed. Kati Martin, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me, Christian.
It is December, which means in one house, in our house certainly, the film Home Alone will be on repeat. The timeless story of Kevin McAllister, played of course by Macaulay Culkin, who was left at home without his parents over the Christmas holidays. And if you've watched as many times as me, you will know that the house itself is almost as iconic as the film. So what if I told you you can stay in it? Well, you can. The original house is now available for rent on Airbnb for just one night during the festive period, and for a measly price, $25. And for that, you can take 4 guests to the house, and you can even set your own booby traps. This is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers here in the UK and around the world. The outgoing German Chancellor Angela Merkel says the unvaccinated will be excluded from all non-essential shops and recreational venues. The United States is looking for some 600,000 cybersecurity experts to begin defending the country against a spiralling number of online attacks. Controversial plan to explore the Cambo oil field could be in doubt as Shell announces it's withdrawing funding from the project. Plus, how the pandemic has shaped people's drug-taking habits around the world. We'll go through the findings of a new survey. Earlier this week, the man who leads MI6 here in Britain told the BBC it was essential for the West to stand up to the full spectrum of threats coming from Moscow and Beijing. It's a view that's been echoed by President Biden, who says the two countries are now waging a global cyber espionage campaign. The oil giant Shell has tonight pulled out of the controversial Cambo oil field development in the west of Shetland. The company had a 30% stake in the project, which faced sustained criticism, you might remember, in the run-up to the COP summit. Shell said the economic case for investment in the North Atlantic project was not strong enough. The majority shareholder, Sycamore Point Energy, says it will continue talks with the UK government over the future of the field. Let's speak to Kingsmill Bond. He's an energy strategist for the green think tank Carbon Tracker. Got a lot of attention, this in Glasgow, over the last few weeks. Does it surprise you that Shell has pulled out? Yeah, it's a really interesting development, one to watch in the coming weeks. Kingsmill Bond, thank you very much indeed.
Great, thank you.
President Biden has reinstated a controversial program at the southern border that will force asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their applications are considered. The Remain in Mexico policy started by Donald Trump was suspended when Joe Biden came to office, but there have been a record number of migrant arrests at the border in recent months. The United States says it will aim to complete migrant claims within 180 days amid concerns they'll be left to languish in Mexico, where they are preyed upon by criminal gangs. Let's speak to our correspondent Will Grant, who joins me from Mexico City. How is this going to work then, Will? Will Grant in Mexico City, thank you very much for that. Do stay with us on BBC News, still to come. A night trapped in the world's best known furniture store. We'll look at what happened in Denmark earlier this week. The continuing effects of Storm Arwen are being felt by communities here in the UK, but there's also been an impact on wildlife. Hundreds of seals were killed when Arwen lashed the coastline, but as Alex Dunlop reports, a handful of pups are now getting the help they need at a wildlife centre in Norfolk in the east of England. Oh, the eyes, the eyes. The Duchess of Sussex has called for a reshaping of the tabloid newspaper industry today after winning a 3-year legal battle against the publisher of the Mail on Sunday. The Duchess sued Associated Newspapers Limited over 5 articles the group had written, which included details of a personal and private letter she'd sent in 2018 to her father, Thomas Markle. Meghan said she'd been patient in the face of deception, intimidation and calculated attacks. This report from our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell, and it does contain some flashing images. People have been taking small amounts of psychedelics, things like LSD and magic mushrooms, to improve their mental health during the pandemic, according to a new global drug study. The method, known as microdosing, was first made popular by Silicon Valley types who claimed the approach stimulated creativity and improved their work performance. But now it appears more recreational drug users are self-medicating with these small doses. So what should we make of it? Larissa Meyer is a scientist at the Global Drug Survey and joins us from Mexico City. Larissa, lovely to have you on the programme. What do these drugs do if you take them in micro doses? Very interesting. Plenty more to talk about on that particular issue, but we'll have to leave it there. Larissa Meyer, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I say Billy bookcase, Ektorp sofa, Poang chair, many of you will instantly know what I'm talking about. Many of you will have walked a million miles through an IKEA warehouse with your pencil and your little piece of brown paper, and who knows, maybe your relationship survived it. Or maybe not. My wife and I, we don't build together. Anyway, forget the hours that you might have spent in IKEA searching your favourite furniture. What if you had to spend the whole night there? Well, that's what happened to 6 lucky customers and 24 staff in Denmark who were left stranded in the IKEA store after a snowstorm and were invited to sleep in the beds that were on display. Yes, they slept in the showroom, where there are any number of beds and mattresses to go around. They were also free to pick whatever bed they wanted, whatever sofa they wanted, wherever they wanted to eat. Yes, they even got to raid the canteen. And some of them now look like dime bars. My worst nightmare. Thank you very much for watching. World News America is right around the corner with Laura, who's standing by. 10 o'clock news will be here for viewers in the UK. We'll see you same time next week. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.